Hari Hari. Okay, so we will continue to read Madhurya Kādambinī. Is my voice okay? Volume?
Yes, Prabhu. Wonderful.
Okay. So last week we completed chapter 2. In chapter 2, we were talking about, Aniṣṭhita Chakravarti was talking about Aniṣṭhita Bhakti. So initially, in the beginning, the first chapter, we discussed about what is Bhakti, what are the glories of Bhakti. Then in the next chapter, we discussed about what is Shraddha, faith, the stages of Bhakti starting from Shraddha. And then we discussed about Aniṣṭhita Bhakti. And Aniṣṭhita Bhakti is characterized by six different qualities, which includes Utsahamai, Ganatarala, Vyuda Vikalpa, Vishya Sangara, Niyamakshama, and Tarangarangini. All these things we discussed, and we are beginning third chapter in this session. So, because Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur discussed about Aniṣṭhita Bhakti, the next chapter should be a discussion of Niṣṭhita Bhakti. But before that, he gives a specific chapter for Anartha Nivṛtti. So you perform unsteady bhakti, then Anartha Nivṛtti happens, then you get Niṣṭha Bhakti or steady bhakti. So Anartha Nivṛtti is discussed, then Aniṣṭhita Bhakti is discussed, then we should have the discussion of Anartha Nivṛtti, then there will be a discussion of steady bhakti. So this third chapter is going to focus on Anartha Nivṛtti, how the Anartha should be destroyed. Atha Anarthanam Nivṛttihi. We begin the chapter of Anartha Nivṛtti. Techa Anarthaha Chaturvidhaha Dushkrita Uttaha Sukrita Uttaha Aparada Uttaha Bhakti Uttaha cha iti. So the anarthas are of four types. Dushkrita Uttaha, that anartha which arise from doing bad activities or sinful activities. And Sukrita Uttaha, those anarthas which arise from Sukriti, even pious activities. So pious activities can also produce anarthas. Then Aparada Uttaha. So by committing offenses in our bhakti activities, some of anarthas come about. And fourth one is Bhakti Uttaha. By performing bhakti properly also, anarthas can come into picture. We already had some discussion about this. Like if I perform bhakti nicely, people will come and glorify me. Those are all coming out of my proper devotion. I'm not doing any mistake, but even then, it's like, some anarthas will come. I can get carried away by those things. So, Tatra Dushkrita Uttaha. So, what is the anarthas that arise from sinful activities? Durabhinivesha, Dvesha, Ragadeha, Purva Uktaha, Kleshaha Eva. So previously, in the previous chapter, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentioned 5 kleshas. Avidya, Asmita, Raga, Dvesha, Abhinivesha. So those 5 kleshas, Avidya, ignorance, Asmita, identification with one's body, and then Raga, attachment, Raga, Dvesha, hatred, and Abhinivesha, clinging onto the death, afraid of fear of death. So all these things are kleshas. So those 5 kleshas are sufferings where the anarthas that arise out of sinful activities. So if we perform sinful activities, these 5 things can be, get stuck with us. So if you don't want these 5 things, then we should stop performing sinful activities. Sukrita Uttaha, Bhoga Abhiniveshaha Vividhaha Eva. Techa Kleshanta Patinaha Iti Kechit. So the anarthas that arise from pious activities are like enjoying mentality. So if we perform punya, what happens? We get nice return. Like, if I donate to somebody, I get in return, something bigger than that. So because of that, what happens? I get more money, more objects to enjoy. I get carried away by the enjoyment tendency. Or if I do certain activities, I will go to Swargaloka. So when we go to Swargaloka, we can also get the mentality to enjoy. So these are the anarthas that arise from performing pious activities. Having said that, it doesn't mean that we should become hard-hearted person, that if somebody is suffering in the street, we don't give them food or anything to help them. Which Bhaktivinoda Thakur has mentioned in Chaitanya Shikshamrita. So he said that the devotee should not be miserly. He should help the poor also by giving blankets if they are suffering from cold, or giving food or prasadam if they are not having food, or giving even medicines if they are suffering from diseases. So this is not necessarily pious activities. It is to maintain the compassionate mentality of a devotee. If we don't do those things and then we just don't care about if somebody is suffering, then we can become a very hard-hearted person. And hard-heartedness is not very good and not conducive for performing bhakti. And we can take it as an order of Vaishnavacharya as well. In that way, we can do those activities as well. Techa kleshantaha patinah iti kechit. So some people classify this anarthas that arise from punyas are also under the category of kleshas. Then the third category is aparadha utthaha, that anarthas that arise from committing offenses. Ityatra nama aparadaha eva grihyante seva aparadhanam tu nama bhitannan tat nivartaka stotra pataihi seva satatyena cha bhavyayasya vivekinaha prayaha pratidinam eva upashama shamena ankuri bhava anupalabdhehe. It's a big statement. He says aparada here means only nama aparad. So in general, we know aparada means there is nama aparad, there is seva aparad. Nama aparad means we know the 10 offenses we could commit against the holy names, starting from sadhuninda and so on. Offenses to Vaishnavas are considering the names of the demigods equal to Krishna and so on. Those are nama aparadas. Then we also know the seva aparadas, like 32 seva aparadas are there. When you are performing deity worship, we should avoid those 32 offenses which are listed in Nectar of Devotion. But here, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that aparada uttaha, the anarthas arising from aparada means only nama aparada. It doesn't mean seva aparada, he says. Why? So does that mean we can commit offenses in performing service to the deity and then we won't get affected by it? So he says that seva pradhanam tu namabihi tat nivartaka stotra pataihi. So when you perform a service to the deity, if you perform any mistake, at the end you can recite some verses or some prayers and or chant the holy name. By doing these things, you are removing the offenses in the service of the deity. And then by continuous seva, also you are removing again those seva aparadas at the root itself, he says. When it's sprouting itself, you are removing all these things by recitation of certain stotras or chanting the holy name or continuing the seva itself. Who every day you have to perform that. And who does that? Bhavyayasya vivekinaha, that the person should be very rational and reasonable person, and he should know things, what is what. Kintu tattat upashama sambhava balena tatra savadhanata shaitilye seva pradhaha api nama pradhaha eva sihu. But if we take advantage of that I can just commit some offenses in performing deity worship, I will intentionally commit it, and then I will just recite this stotra, and then everything will be nullified. If you think like that, then that becomes nama aparad. Why? It is said tatahi uttam namno balad yasehi papa buddhihi. So one of the offenses is committing strength on the chanting of the holy name. Tatra nama iti upalakshanam bhakti matrasya eva upashama kasya. So it doesn't now committing sins on the strength of the holy name doesn't mean that only the holy name. It means any bhakti. So by reciting the stotra or some verses, my offenses in deity worship will be nullified. If we think like that, even that is also an offense to the holy name. That is what he is mentioning here. So we should not intentionally commit when we are performing service to the deity, because of our ignorant mentality or pramada, is inattentive mentality, we may commit some offenses, not intentionally, unintentionally. So those can be rectified, but intentional offenses, they become offense to the holy name itself. Dharma shastre api prayashchitta balena papa acharane na tasya papasya kshayaha pratyuta ghadata eva. It is mentioned even in the Dharma Shastras like Manusmriti, Yagyavakya Smriti, and so on. There also, when you perform a sin, there is a prayashchitta is mentioned. If you have performed this sin, you go and do this prayashchitta, then that sin will be nullified. So even those Shastras also say that, but if you perform intentionally those sinful activities, the prayashchitta won't work. So even Dharma Shastra say like that, then what to speak of bhakti? So nothing should be committed intentionally. Unintentional things, it can just removed, but intentional things cannot get removed easily. Then there is another objection, nanu. Nanu means objection. Nanu evam nahi anga upakrame dhvamsaha mad dharmasya uddhava anu api. So he is quoting a Bhagavatam verse. This is 11:2. What is it? 11:29-20. Nahyangopakrame dhvangso madharmasyo dhavanupi maya vyavasita samyak nirgunatvat anashisha. Nahi anga upakrame dhvamsaha. So if somebody has started performing an anga of bhakti and did not complete it, there is no fall down in that. For example, this is a Kartik month. So in the beginning of Kartik month, I take a resolute that, I'm going to perform 20 rounds throughout the Kartik month. And then halfway, I just, go back performing only 16 rounds. I wasn't able to completely follow that, whatever resolution I have taken. Even that also, there is no fall down in that, in the sense that you have performed 15 days, you didn't complete the whole thing. That doesn't mean that 15 days, whatever you have performed is waste. No, that is not the case. In bhakti, Maya vyavasitaga samyak nirgunatvat anashishaha. Because this bhakti is nirguna, it is not subject to the gunas. Because of that, the Lord himself has established this bhakti. That is a special case. Whereas in the case of karma kanda activity, let's say I'm starting a yajna and then I don't complete it, I stop in between, then we don't get the result. We get zero result for performing the yajna halfway. But in the case of bhakti, it is not the case. Even I'm starting to chant around, I somehow stop in between. We still get the benefit of chanting half around. It's not like we don't get the benefit of chanting the whole around. So, and that verse is stated, Visheshataha dasha aranaha ayam japa matrena siddhita. Just by doing japa alone of the 10-syllable mantra, which is the Diksha mantra. In some lines, you get a 10-syllable mantra. In our line, we get 18-syllable mantra. So this 10-syllable mantra, just by performing that, one can attain perfection. Those two statements are mentioned. So the argument is a little complex here. Let me try to simplify it. So these two statements say that if you perform some bhakti, you start some bhakti and then don't complete it, there is no fall down. The second statement says that just by doing japa, you don't need to do any other bhakti activity. Just by doing japa alone, you will get perfection. Can I take these two statements and then use it, take advantage of these two statements, and then not perform all the angas of bhakti, or start an anga of bhakti and then stop in between. If I do like that, purposefully, intentionally, will that result in nama parada? Ma evam, it is not the case. It is okay. Even if you intentionally don't perform all the angas of bhakti, if you just perform one anga of bhakti, or you start something and intentionally you just, drop it in between also, there is no fault in that. It doesn't become a nama parada. Namno balad yasyeti atra pape buddhi chikirshadi. Then what does it mean committing sins on the strength of the holy name? So committing sins on the strength of the holy name means, there it says, Namno balad yasya hi papa buddhihi. Papa buddhi. What does that mean? Papa buddhi. Pape buddhihi chikirshadi. So if you have a desire to perform a sinful activity, then that is called papa buddhi, committing sin on the strength of the holy name. That is, I intentionally try to perform a sinful activity. So what is a sin? Tadevam hi papam yatra sati ninda prayaschittati shravanam. So in the scripture, whenever a condemned activity is defined, they define with the two qualities. One is criticism will be there. This is a bad activity. One should not perform. Only animals will perform these kind of activities. So there will be a criticism. Then the second thing is there will be a prayaschitta. If one has performed it, what to do? What activity to do to counteract that? So these two things are present for a particular activity, then that activity should be considered as a sinful activity. So he's giving a definition of sinful activity. If one has desire to perform that sinful activity, then only on the strength of the holy name, then it becomes a nama parada. Not that I intentionally not perform some angas of bhakti, then I get nama parada. It's not the case. Nacha karma marga iva bhakti marge api anga vaikalyadav kwapi ninda shravanam iti na tatra aparata shanka. So we don't need to fear if we start an anga of bhakti and then don't complete it, we don't need to be fearful, because there is nowhere it is criticized. That's what he says. Kwapi ninda shravanam. Nowhere it is criticized. So no need to be fearful of that. It will become nama parada. Yaduktam. So before I go, I want to check if anybody has any question or had difficulty in understanding this, or any reflection or comments. Okay. So proceeding. Yaduktam, it is mentioned in Bhagavatam 11 to 34 to 35. So, Evai Bhagavata Prokta Upayahi Atmalabdhaye Anjaf Pungsam Vidusham Vidhi Bhagavatan Hitan. He says, here is the definition of bhakti is given. Bhagavatan Dharman, that is Bhagavata Dharma. What is the definition of Bhagavata Dharma? That which is established by Bhagavan himself. Bhagavata Prokta Upayaha. For one's own benefit, Atmalabdaye. Quick benefit. Not a slow benefit. Quickly one attains benefit. Pungsam avidusham. Even though one is an ignorant person, by performing bhakti, one attains benefits quickly for oneself. So that is called Bhagavata Dharma. And the next verse says, Yanasthaya naraha rajan na pramadyeta karyachit. So by performing that Bhagavata Dharma or bhakti, one does not get bewildered, or one does not become inattentive, or bewildered is simpler to understand. One does not get bewildered at any point in time. Dhavan nimilyava netre na skalet na patet iha. So while running, if you run with your eyes closed or your eyes open, in the path of bhakti, in the road of bhakti, if you're running very fast and even your eyes closed or eyes open, na skalet, you don't fall down, you don't slip, your feet doesn't get slipped. Na patet, you don't fall down also. No, this is kalet, means slipping off, and you don't get slipped and you don't get fallen down in the path of bhakti. So that much glorious is bhakti. Atra nimilya iti kartru vyapara lingena vidyamane eva netre mudrayitva tatra api dhavan padanyasa sthalam atikramya api vrajannana skhalet iti akshara artha labdhehe bhagavad dharmamashritya tadangani sarvani nyatva api agnaha iva kani chit ullangya api anutishtanna pratyayavayi syat napi phalad brashyet ityeva vyakya upapadyate. So this is a very long sentence. So here he says the meaning of nimilya. Nimilya means closing the eyes. So what does it mean, closing the eyes in the performance of bhakti? So closing the eyes means the eyes are there. First, eyes should be there. That means you are knowledgeable of scriptures. Your eyes are there. But then you close it. That means you don't, follow some of the scriptural injunctions. That means skipping of some angas of bhakti. That is, he gives the example. When you are running, your feet is not touching every step of the road. You are jumping and going, very fast you are going. So you are skipping some of the parts. So similarly, when we are performing the angas of bhakti, there are, which Rupa Goswami has mentioned 64 angas of bhakti. We may skip some of the angas. We may exclusively focus on chanting, or we may exclusively focus on deity worship or whatever it is. Even if that is the case, we don't fall down. But we should be knowing everything. Tad angani sarvani jnatva api. It's not like we don't know anything. We know the scriptural injunctions, but some of the things we don't follow. So what happens because of that? We still get the result. It's not that we don't get the result. That is the meaning. The next statement is, that itself will take some time to explain. Nimilanam nama ajnanam tasya api shruti smriti vishayau it esha tu na sangachate mukyartam bhadha ayogat. So he quotes Sridhara Swami's commentary on this verse. I'm going to first share that, then we'll come back here. So here is the Bhagavatam, 11th canto. Oops. Just 11 to 34. Okay. So here is 11 to 35, which we saw, where Krishna mentions that one, even if runs in the road of bhakti with the eyes closed, one doesn't fall down. So there is the first Sridhara Swami's commentary is there. There is the point, Nimilanam nama ajnanam yata ahuhu. So until then, he gives the meaning of what does it mean, closing of the eyes. So Sridhara Swami says, Nimilanam, closing of the eyes mean ajnanam, you are ignorant of the scripture, because it is said, Shruti smriti ubhene tre vipranam prakirtite ekena vikalah kano dvabhyam andha prakirtita iti ajnatva api iti arthaha. So the smriti and the shruti are like two eyes of the vipras, the brahmanas. Ekena vikalaha kanaha. If one eye is destroyed, then he becomes a one-eyed person. Dvabhyam andaha prakirtitaha. If two eyes are destroyed, then he becomes a blind person. So by this, it is mentioned what is eye, So here Sridhar Swami concludes that closing the eyes means ignorant of the scripture. That is Sridhar Swami's interpretation. So Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur is going to contradict that. He says, Titu Yesha na sangachate, but that meaning is not fitting here. He says, well, Sridhar Swami's explanation. Why? Mukhyartha bhada ayogat. Because the primary meaning is obstructed there. And what is the primary meaning? First of all, you have eyes. That means you have knowledge of the scripture. But then you are closing your eyes. That means you are not looking at the rules. Some of the rules you are ignoring. Okay, but it doesn't mean that you are ignorant of the scripture. So here is the point where one of the later acharyas is directly quoting and contradicting the previous acharya. Why does he do that? So usually we see that the later acharyas, they don't contradict the previous acharyas. They just accept it. Even if there is some mistake also, they don't point it out. But here he directly points it out, and then he gives a contradictory explanation also. Why does he do that? Because during the time of Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur, many people were misusing these kind of statements in the name of Raganuga Bhakti. So in the name of Raganuga Bhakti, they were just, Vaidhi Bhakti means you follow the scriptures. Raganuga Bhakti means you ignore the scriptures and then you just follow whatever your mind says, like that. So he was refuting that during his time. He was actively refuting that and preaching against that mentality. So this point, one can easily take advantage of the commentary of Sridhara Swami and then says that, Sridhara Swami himself, he says that you can perform bhakti without, knowing what is said in the scriptures. I'll just do on my own. So then it becomes very critical for Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur to give an explanation on that. So, even if it contradicts the previous acharya. So that is the intention here. So he says that that's not the meaning. Nacha, and then he further explains what does it mean running. Nacha dhavan nimilya iti etateva dvatrimshat aparadha abhavam api krodi karoti iti vachyam. Yan bhagavata proktan upayana shritya iti uktatvat. So running also doesn't mean, closing your eyes and running doesn't mean that you also commit all the 32 offenses in the seva aparadha. While performing service to the deity, you commit all kinds of sin offenses. No, that's also not the case, because the verse itself says, Yan Bhagavata Proktan Upayan Ashritya. So you follow whatever is instructed by the Lord. You don't do on your own. We still follow the instructions of the Supreme Lord. So I will stop here. It is already 8 o'clock. This part completes the whole discussion. I'll stop here. If there is any questions or any comments, you can take it. Ramba Pro, please go ahead. Forgot your initiative name. Rohini Dulal Pro.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dhanavad Pranam.
Dhanas Pranam Prabhuji.
Explanation. I heard this closing the eyes verse a couple of times earlier in a couple of classes. I was wondering what exactly it means. And thank you for opening my eyes with the details of that.
Yes, thank you, Prabhuji. Okay, we'll stop here. Thank you, devotees, for joining. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Rajan.
Thank you. Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namo Nanta Gauri Vaishnava.
Thank you, everyone, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much.